Hi, this is Judy Sedgman again, and this is the fourth in a series of videos that I promised myself that I would make this year, uh, describing and exploring the nature and the power and the meaning and the significance of the three principles. And in this one, I'm going to talk about human psychology, basically, what the principles mean to our understanding of how human beings function, and why they have a huge impact on our understanding that there is no such thing as mental illness, that mental illness is an illusion. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It doesn't mean we don't experience it, but it's illusory. It's not built in, it's not guaranteed, and it's not created by life. Now, the reason why this is important is because really the field of psychology and psychiatry, basically, the field of our understanding of how mental activity functions, has really emerged from the idea, the assumption, the basic assumption that people react to things that happen outside of them. So external events occur, and how we react to them creates our mental state. So the entire purpose, basically, of the way we've talked about, treated, and addressed mental illness, so-called mental illness in people, is by saying, well, gosh, the poor thing had a terrible childhood, and you can't expect her to, to have a normal experience with other people. Or, oh gosh, after the death of her grandmother, the closest person in her life, I mean, it was, of course, she would fall apart. We understand that. Or no wonder the person is doing badly in school. They have an unpleasant home life. And, we would always ascribe aberrant ways of looking at life or behaviors or thoughts that people had to external events. And, it very rarely came up for someone to say, well, gee, it's funny, like these two brothers grew up in the same house, and one of them is a criminal and one of them is a minister. Like, how is that possible? If the bad childhood was responsible for their experience. Now, it seems kind of silly as I say this now. I mean, I thought that for years. I really believed that. I took a course in psychology years ago when I started college, and it was a long time ago. And that was, kind of what we were taught, that everything could be ascribed to environment, circumstances, events, tragedies, war, disruption, bad parenting, whatever. And the expectation was that it would affect a person, and give them create a different kind of response and mental experience. And then some of them would be would react in a crazy way. Now, the thing is, the grain of truth is buried in that explanation. But if you're looking to outside events, then you feel you have to get the person to either minimize those events, understand them differently, as sometimes in psychology referred to as reframe them, come up with some kind of justification for why it didn't matter, understand that of course they were, reactive, but it's not necessary, but always based on fixing something, fixing what's broken, what's happened to you because of this external world that you found yourself in, is, something we've got to deal with. And we can fix it. We can fix you. Like, I mean, increasingly, especially with the emergence of a lot of psychotropic medications, The promise was, don't worry, but it doesn't matter how much trouble you've been in psychologically, we can help you, we can fix you, we can give you something that will get you through it, and we can help you to understand what happened to you, to you. Now, when I first started learning about the principles, I had the good fortune of learning about them from a psychiatrist who was very clear about the importance of them and the difference it made in his work, who could explain in very simple terms, look, you know what this is, the significance of this is that mental illness doesn't come from events and circumstances. It comes from the kind of thinking we create about them. Now, I had never, until we had those kinds of conversations initially, understood or thought or even questioned where thinking came from. I don't know. I mean, it seemed to make sense to me that, if I was in an automobile accident, I'd have upset thinking, and it was like the accident caused it. And it hadn't dawned on me that some people have accidents and just calmly deal with it, and they don't get upset about it. And I remember even watching like skiers in the Olympics, would have this terrible fall, and some of them were able to just get up and brush it off and keep skiing, and others of them would just stop and go, okay, I can't finish this race, I'm too upset. It wasn't the fall, it wasn't the fact of what the external circumstance, it was something different. But I didn't know that we are the thinkers, that we create the thoughts for whatever reason. Now, what the principles describe is that it is not an outside-in world. Yes, there is a reality. Yes, there is a real world out there. Yes, terrible things happen to people. Wonderful things happen to people. Things happen all day long. But our experience of them changes not because of the things, but because of the thoughts that we bring to mind and take to heart about those things. And, when you think about it, that's so obvious, and yet it wasn't. It wasn't in the fields of psychological treatment, and it wasn't in the way human psychology was described in textbooks that taught to people. It was not obvious. Yet in all these years now, for more than 40 years, I've been involved in the principles, and it seems like, well, how could we even have thought those things? But heck, I was one of the ones that thought them because that's what I was taught, and I just assumed that I was being taught by people that knew something. I just took it for granted that, okay, that's it. That's how it works. Now, what was revealed to him, what he discovered in the experience that he had when he saw beyond that, was that, no, we create our own thoughts. We are the thinkers. We are the source of our own experience. And nothing can make us think one thing or another. We can only think it because we choose to those thoughts. And I think if you look at your everyday life, it'd be very hard not to say, oh yeah, that's true, because someday I as a parent, I learned this very quickly. There were days when my child would be cranky when she was little and couldn't even talk yet, when she would be cranky and out of sorts and, very hard to soothe. And I would think, oh, poor sweet little thing. There must be something that hurts, or she must be having a hard day. I don't know. She can't tell me yet. And I would just love her and cuddle her and drop what I was doing and say, okay, today's about bringing peace back to this baby. And there were other days when she would get cranky like that and upset, and I would think, oh, darn it, I have so much to do today. Why did this have to happen? And I would get, I'd put her down and hope she would cry herself to sleep. And I didn't just drop everything and say, oh, this poor child, she needs her mom right now. I mean, it's not like I mistreated her, but I didn't show the same amount of compassion and willingness to sacrifice my own ideas, what I should be doing to the need of the moment. That's one example. There are some times when people that I'm very close to appear to hurt my feelings when I think about something they said or did. And there are other times when I have the thought, oh, gee, they're just having a bad day, or they don't see life the way I do. It's no big deal. Now, the event is not what's creating my experience of it. My experience of it is being created by what I think about it and whether I have any idea whatsoever that I'm the thinker and I can change my mind. So what the principles explain is our power. I cannot stress this enough. Our power as human beings to find neutral, to find peace, to change directions, to think differently in the moment, because we can, because that's the nature of humanity. Just as we have the power, to lift a hand or put it down. We have the power to hold on to a thought or drop it. And it's a beautiful thing. And I didn't know that if we didn't take every single thought that came to mind seriously because it appeared real as soon as we thought it, we could, there was a deeper sense that we could access as to whether this thought was helpful or not. Should I keep this thought in mind? Should I keep exploring this thought, or maybe this isn't the best way to be thinking? And I mean, we all do it. I still do it. It's 40 years. I still have moments when I get cranky and upset. But when I do, I'm kind of like, try to make things right as soon as I see what I'm doing. It's not always immediate, but I just I can't even imagine all those years I spent victimized by the thoughts that I was making up. I mean, if you can see that, just even get a glimpse of the fact that we are creating the way we experience our life, good or bad life. Doesn't, I used to do a lot of work with women who were struggling in life. I worked for a women's resource center where a lot of our clientele were women who couldn't access mental health services. We offered free counseling, and they had not much going for them. They were living under the poverty line. They had children with problems, or they had a spouse, an absent spouse, or a spouse who mistreated them, or just bad things in their life, and they didn't have a whole lot of fun stuff going on. And I remember when I started there, because I really hadn't worked with that population before, when I started there, I thought, well, gosh, I hope it helps people to learn that they're making this up. I mean, they're not really making up their life, but they're making up what they think of it and what they see beyond it. And I thought, it's the only thing I know to teach now. It's the only thing I can share with them. It's the only thing I can help with. So I'm going to do it. And I found as I listened to people talking to me, I could hear the health in them, even though they couldn't. Even though they couldn't. if that's where your eyes are trained and your heart is trained and your mind is looking, as you listen to people talk, you hear the health deeper than the thoughts they're expressing in the moment. Or a healthy thought will break through and they won't even notice it because they don't know the principles. They don't know what's going on. And I remember one time I had a client who had waited a long time in the waiting room with her friend. She was really a wreck, this girl. She had, she had been crying and crying and crying. Her eyes were all swollen, and she had on a skirt and blouse, but her blouse was kind of untucked and untidy, and her hair was a mess, and her makeup had run all down her face. And her friend had just sat there with her and said, "We're just going to wait until a counselor can see us." And it was the end of the day, and they came in, and she just starts crying the minute she sees me, and she's still crying, and she's saying, like, "Who does this? Who does what I did? Who does it? What kind of person does this?" And of course, I had no idea what she'd done. And her friend explained to me that she had, for some reason, she'd had a nice life, a good job, a lovely husband, 2 children. They made good money. They had a boat and a nice home. And for some reason, she decided that she didn't have enough adventure, and she rented an apartment in the city, and she would go there and increasingly frequently, and tell her husband that she was visiting a sick friend or whatever she told him, and go to the apartment, change into some very sexy clothes and put on her blonde wig and go down to bars and pick up men and take them back to the apartment. And of course, when her husband found out about it, he filed for divorce. And this is where she was at that time. She was facing the fact that her husband and her parents and his parents did not want her to have anything to do with the children, and he had filed for divorce, and they were very upset with her, and they didn't had very little sympathy. But her friend was very sympathetic, but she didn't know what to do with her. And this woman just kept saying that, "Who does this? Like, how did this, how?" And I said, "You want me to really answer that question? Who does this? Because I'll tell you who does it." And she said, "You know?" And I said, "Yeah, I can tell you." She's like, "Oh, who does it? Who does this? And then why me?" And I said, "Who does this is somebody that gets very insecure and has a lot of thoughts that frighten them or upset them or distress them in some way, that they will come up with the best idea they can in that state to get relief from that thinking. That's who does it." She said, "Well, that could be anybody." And I said, "Right, that's true. Could be anybody." And she said, "So everybody's evil?" And I said, "Well, everybody's got the potential to act on their worst thoughts. Yeah. But also everybody's got the potential to understand the system and know when to step back and quiet down and let those thoughts pass." And she really quieted down just hearing that. And she said, well, why? And I said, "Well, because people take their thoughts to heart. And when people get very frightened or upset about their thoughts, or their thoughts look really important to them, they take them seriously, and they believe what they think. So if you get the idea in some weird moment in your life that you don't have enough excitement, and you're getting older and your kids are getting older, and you have never, had any wild times as a kid, and you think, "Oh, I got to have these experiences before it's too late," you might act on that. Or you might go like, "What am I doing? Why am I even thinking that? It's like some bad movie or something." But it's you thinking it. And she said, "I know, but my whole life has fallen apart." And I said, "Yeah." Mhm. And she said, "Well, I can't get it back. And I said, well, I don't know whether you can get it back or not. That's not my business. I said, I can tell you how to get yourself back and then do the best you can with the wisdom that everybody has. And she said, this is too strange. I'm beyond help. And I said, no, you're not. Nobody's beyond help. Nobody's broken. Now, how would I be able to say that confidently? Because after all those years, I really saw deep down the power that we have as the thinker to bring a thought to mind and see it as so real we have to act on it. That's a power that we have. And we don't understand that power. It'd be like not knowing how to get your car out of third gear. You'd never be able to stop well. If you didn't understand how to shift a car from one gear to the next, or if the car was somehow malfunctioning, you couldn't stop it. And that's kind of how we get sometimes when we get caught up in negative or upsetting or distressing or habitual old frightening thoughts. Those thoughts take on this life of, we start thinking, oh my gosh, I got to do something about this. And instead of realizing that all we have to do is own them, own the fact that I'm not using my thoughts on my own behalf right now. I have this power to take them seriously or not. Not a good idea to take them seriously right now. Gotta let them go. Gotta let them go. And as soon as you turn away from a thought and let it go, it goes. It's gone. The experience of it is gone. And that's what we didn't know until the principles. We kind of intuitively, a lot of people seem to know that. There's a lot of so-called, common wisdom, or old wives' wisdom, or whatever they say, grandmother's wisdom, like, why don't you sleep on it, honey? Don't think about it now. That kind of advice that was kind of pointing in that direction. But until the principles, we didn't truly understand that that's the essential power that we have to continually reaccess our own natural mental well-being when our mind is at peace. We just didn't understand it. And forgive us, we didn't. So the principles, the power of mind, the energy behind life, the essential divine energy that powers everything, allows us to continually think, allows our blood to circulate, our organs to function, our eyes to focus, whatever, that power is expressed in our experience of life as thought. We create thoughts. And those thoughts, when we create them, come to life for us through our senses. We become aware of our thoughts and we experience them. It's like, yeah, I'm sure we've all had this experience. So sometimes you have a backache or a pain in your neck or something, and you wake up in the morning and think, oh man, this is going to be a terrible day. I've got this pain. And then you end up getting absorbed with a friend and something that you're doing, and you totally forget about your pain. Now the pain is still there, but it's not on your mind. So it doesn't exist for you until you think about it again. We've all had experiences like that. It's like how we forget things. You put something down somewhere and you weren't focused. And then 20 minutes later, you think, oh, where is that thing? I don't know where I put it. Well, it just didn't register. The thought flew through your mind as you put it down. So you have to go look for it. Somewhere, it's there, but you just lost sight of it. Well, that's how we kind of lose sight of our power sometimes. It's like we get involved in these very vivid thoughts that we have, and it looks like we have to fix them. We have to do something about them. We have to figure out what's going on. And we don't just have to decide, no, don't want to spend my time with these guys. That's what the principles have brought to the field of mental health. The essential fact that nobody's broken, that the power of mind is divine and spiritual, formless energy that we, the individual, is using to create. It's like having an electric plug and deciding, am I going to plug in a buzz saw, or am I going to plug in this pretty lamp? The plug doesn't care. Power doesn't care. It'll power whatever you put plug into it. But if you care, if you think, I don't like myself when I'm caught up in negative thoughts, I don't like the kinds of things that I do when I take my upsetting thoughts seriously. And you know you have the power to change direction. You can do it. You know, I learned to drive we lived in Washington, D.C. when I was in high school, and that's where I learned to drive. And Washington, D.C. is not an easy city to drive in, and it's a complicated city because there's so many circles, and if you miss your turn, you got to go all the way around the circle again. And the streets, although they're orderly, you have to kind of know whether you're in the area where you've got 3-syllable streets or 2-syllable streets, because they're alphabetical, but depends on number of syllables. There's a lot to know about finding your way around. Now, when I was taking the bus to school in different places before I learned to drive, I never paid any attention to any of that. I just got on the right bus and I got off when I got to my stop. But now all of a sudden I was behind the wheel of a car and I had to know what street to be on and where I should turn. And that's kind of like discovering your power to think. You're the driver now. You're the driver. That's an incredible power. And we have now the responsibility to be accountable for it. We get lost, we have to find ourselves, we have to be accountable for it. But we have to be grateful for it, that is an incredible gift, that you don't have to think anything for any longer than you want to think. That is what mental health is. It's knowing that. It's not that you're 100% happy all the time just because you know you have mental health. It's because when you're not happy, you know that you have the power to change or to indulge it. You can be unhappy for as long as you want to. Some people like that. I mean, we have free will. We can do what we want with our thinking, because that's our gift, our power to think and to see our thinking as real and to see whether we want to go towards it or back off of it. Now, that in a nutshell is the incredible essence of the principles explaining why there is no such thing as mental illness, because nothing outside of us can take away that power, but we can give it away. Just that other lady, she just gave into her worst thoughts and then hated herself for what she had done after she came to her senses, but it was too late. She'd already done it and she thought she was bad. You know, that's the conclusion you reach. Well, I did that thing, I'm really bad. No, you were just caught up in thought. It's like I was talking to somebody that had 4 different mental health diagnoses at one point. And I, knowing a little bit about what the diagnoses all meant, I thought, you can't have these 4 things at one time. They're contradictory. And I said, how did you get these 4 diagnoses? She said, well, over the course of several years, I saw different people and they all diagnosed me differently. And I said, well, did you ever wonder, like, how do I have all these different mental illnesses? She said, no, I just assumed they knew what they were talking about. And I accepted the medicine or whatever they did for me. And She said, so now I'm wondering what you're going to tell me is wrong with me. And I said, I'm going to tell you nothing is wrong with you. What's wrong with you is you're taking these diagnoses seriously and living as though they were true because you think that. And she was stunned. And she said, I don't understand how you can say that. I mean, I've had mental illness now for like 8 years. And I said, no, you've had strange thoughts that frightened you, that you took seriously and took to the doctor, and he took them seriously, and it began explaining them to you and treating you as though they had some validity in your life, and you had to deal with them. And then you had other strange thoughts and so on and so forth. And I said, and I'm telling you that you can handle your own strange thoughts. I'm going to teach you about that. And you know, when we can get to that point where we explain that to people, mental health is innate. You're born with it. You're also born with this incredible power to think. Everybody's power to think feels different to them and they use it in different ways. And there's some things we, can't explain, like why some kids are cheerful from birth and other kids are crankier. But nonetheless, they're still using their thinking. That's how they're creating it. And once you get to the point you can explain it to them, kids are very quick to say, oh, that's really cool. Kind of my superpower. Yeah, it's your superpower. You're the thinker. So, put on your good thinking cape, and that's kind of what it amounts to. But the principles are so profound in that when you think about the suffering in the world today, how many people are truly suffering who wouldn't suffer if they knew that they didn't have to take the suffer thoughts seriously, whatever thoughts they were creating their own experience of suffering, that they were indulging those thoughts rather than letting them pass, rather than looking at things differently, rather than coming up with different ideas. I live in a city, and I live right downtown, big city. And there are a lot of homeless people downtown. And even though I live in a perfectly nice area, I walk past a lot of homeless people every day. Some of them the same people. If you live in a neighborhood, you sort of get to know the local people. Now, it's very interesting to me. They're all living in the same circumstances. They don't have anything. They depend on the kindness of strangers. They sometimes don't get meals. So they have problems. If they get sick, they can get help, but they have to know how to get it, and it's a very difficult life to be homeless. Now, some of them are just happy as can be and friendly, and they're chatty. They talk, if you'll talk to them, they'll talk to you, and they don't want to necessarily talk to you about what's wrong. Some of them have great stories to tell about their life. Some of them are very talented. Some are there sitting there with a guitar, and you'd be amazed at the music they produce, or a horn. Others are just annoyed, mad, mean. If you don't give them money, they curse. Now they're all experiencing the same external circumstances, but their thinking is dramatically different about it. Now, it doesn't make homelessness a good thing, that you could have, more positive approach towards it. But it makes your life as a homeless person a lot nicer if you're not bitter and angry all day long. And the likelihood that someone is going to reach out to you, or that someone's going to say, listen, do you have any skills? I mean, I want to hire you if there's something you can do. I want to show you how to get back into life. That's more likely to happen if you're a person that somebody would be willing to spend some time with. So that all comes from your state of mind and how you're using your thinking. That's a power. That's a power. It's not an accident. And that's why it's really, the more I think about the principles, the more I realize it's so important for children to learn this early. To see the power of their imagination. The children are very imaginative, and they often lost between their imaginary friends and their little worlds that they create in their heads and what's really going on. That's sometimes frustrating, but they can drift in and out of whatever reality they're creating and accept that. Yeah, I know I made up the alligator, but I wanted a friend that was an alligator, so I created the alligator. And it's just as real to them because thinking that you're doing it looks real to you in the moment. And the kids drift in and out of that. It doesn't bother them at all. They kind of intuitively recognize that that's something they can do. They get taught out of it. We try to say, no, that's just a fiction. That's a story you're telling you. That's not real. Here's what's real: the living room, the couch. Now it's not that they don't have to see the difference, but they also have to realize that sometimes the couch looks like a safe and comfortable place, and sometimes the couch is itchy. The experience that they have of even what's real is variable, just as their imagination is variable and drifts back and forth between what's in front of them and what's existing in their imagination. But if kids get this right away, I mean, I've never had any problem explaining this to young kids. But you try to explain it sometimes to somebody in their 30s and they have an argument for all of it. That can't be true because what about this and what about that? Well, that's your thinking. That's your thinking saying that can't be true. So it doesn't look true to you. It doesn't look like it could be. What if it were? I've said so many times to people I've been working with, well, how about pretending for a couple of days that it is true? I don't care if you believe it or not. Just pretend that you have this power and see what happens. And they're like, well, I don't know how to do that. I'm going like, well, yeah, sure you do. You just don't, you never asked yourself, can I do that? But I said, we can do a little experiment right here, and I'll take them through a little thought moment, and have them drift from one thought to another. And then they realize they feel entirely differently. Like I'll ask somebody like, what's the best thing that happened to you yesterday? And they'll tell me, and they'll brighten right up, even if they were telling me about their terrible life only a moment ago. Or ask a mother about her kids, like, tell me something cute your kids do. Right away they're in a whole other space. That's thought, the power of thought. As soon as we bring it to mind and take it to heart, it looks real. And it gives us an experience of whatever we consider to be real according to that thought. Mental health is not 100% healthy thinking all the time and never having a negative thought and never having a scary thought and never being upset, blah, blah, blah. Mental health is knowing and seeing what you're doing. Mental health is recognizing, ooh, I'm in a bad mood. I'm thinking a lot of negative thoughts. Maybe I should keep quiet for a little bit. Now, we can't do it all the time, but at least when we know we're doing it and we get through it, which we always do because thinking is always moving, we can look back and go, I said some things I kind of regret. I should call that person and say, I'm sorry, I was just in a mood. As opposed to, thinking about it again makes me mad all over again. We just sort of become accountable for our own happiness because it's always available. Always available. Peace of mind is always available. We're not always taking advantage of that, but it's always there. It's one thought away. Anger is one thought away. Disappointment is one thought away. Sadness is one thought away. So there really is no such thing as mental illness, the way we think about it, as like a disease. Like a lot of people really believe if somebody tells them they have this or that diagnosis, that it's a lifetime thing because there's no cure for it. Well, you can't cure what isn't an illness. It's like you can't cure something that isn't really there. It's like having an imaginary itch. There's nothing causing it. It's just in your mind. You got to wait till you stop thinking about it. And the truth is that we are born to be at peace, to be at ease in life, to be creative, and to enjoy the power that we have to think whatever we want. And we're also born with the understanding that that's what's going on. We're born to understand that so that we can keep ourselves safe from our own thinking. We don't have to submit. Oh, I've had clients that have said to me, oh, these thoughts, they just keep coming. Like, where are they coming from? Is there like a bad thought fairy out there? Is there a thought volcano somewhere that's dropping ashes on us? They're coming from within us because we create our thoughts. That's our power. If you don't like the experience you're having, take a step back, let your mind quiet down, let your thoughts drift away. They always do if you don't get all excited about them. And then allow new thoughts to come to mind. And your mental health, which is always right there, just one thought away, comes back to the surface. It's sort of like if you have a jar with a gritty substance in it, and it's got clear water up to the rim, and you have a little child there and you shake it all up, and then it's all gritty and stuff everywhere. And the kid will say, what happened to the water? Where's the water gone? Because kids don't know that, well, I shook it all up and all the stuff just got up in there. And you set it down and everything settles to the bottom and the water's back. The clear water, the stuff's on the bottom. Now that's one way to explain to children how thoughts work. We get our thoughts all agitated and we get, oh my gosh, I've lost everything. I'm crying and upset and I'm never going to be fine again. I'll just let it settle down and the water, the clarity comes back. That's the power. So when we say, nobody's broken, we really mean it. Doesn't mean there are people who aren't behaving as though they were broken, who aren't believing their broken thoughts, who aren't, in need of help because they don't understand what they're doing. But it means that the mental health system, with an understanding of the principles, would be focused on giving people the power back, helping them to get back to their own sense of being the thinker and having volition and having free will and having the power to calm down and think again. It would change the whole perception that we have of mental health treatment. I often think, like mental health treatment, as like my person who taught me first said, I really was never, until I learned this, I would call myself a mental health professional, but really I was a mental illness professional because all I knew was people were mentally ill and you had to fix it, take care of it, treat it. And now I say, no, I'm in the mental health. I really am in the mental health profession because I'm looking for the mental health in people, pointing them back to it and helping them to see that they're creating it, that it's in them to be mentally healthy, no matter what the circumstances external to them. So in sum, the effect that the understanding of the principles as it is spreading across the globe, and as it will continue to do so, is it will completely change the way we look at mental health. Right now we have a kind of figure ground problem, you know, where there, if mental health, mental illness is in the foreground, we take it, we have to deal with it. But the truth is that mental health is always, always, always present. And when people get back there to it, they get back to the understanding. There's really a very simple thing. You're making it up. It looks real. When it looks real, you act as though it is real, and you do things that afterwards you ask, who does that? Who does that? Who does that is somebody who takes thinking seriously that does not deserve to be taken seriously. Because, and how do you tell? Because you feel compelled and upset and anxious and fraught. All those feelings are the body's warning sign to say, hey, sit down for a minute, take a deep breath, clear your head. So it changes the whole field in the sense that it's not complicated. As all of us who work in this field say, there's really only one mental illness. And it's the misunderstanding and therefore misuse of the beautiful gift of thought. So thank you.